FBI Director Wray, on October 6, 2018, the families and close-knit community of Schoharie County in rural upstate New York experienced the deadliest transportation disaster in the U.S. in almost a decade when an illegal extended limo that shouldn't have even been on the road crashed and instantaneously killed 20 people. Are you aware of this? I know you have deep ties to upstate New York.
I'm very generally aware of it, partly because of my ties to upstate New York.
I'm asking about this at today's Worldwide Threats briefing because the owner of the limo company, Shahed Hussein, was a longtime informant of the FBI for prominent anti-terrorism cases in the War on Terror, who testified publicly in numerous high-profile federal cases. And it is our job in Congress to conduct proper oversight of the FBI's activities, including the proper and improper use and handling of informants when it comes to addressing worldwide threats. This FBI informant had multiple run-ins with the law and various state and federal agencies that miraculously were brushed away again and again and again. He lied on tax returns and immigration papers. He misled FBI handlers, committed bankruptcy fraud. His hotel that he owned racked up code violations and tens of thousands in unpaid property taxes with no consequences. And most tragically, this deadly limo company falsified reports, lied about the alteration of an illegal vehicle, and the out-of-service rate for this vehicle was 80%, unimaginable. I believe that this deadly limo tragedy, the biggest transportation tragedy in this country, could have been avoided had we addressed the illegal acts of this FBI informant. And the FBI owes families answers. There's been extensive reporting on this issue. So my questions for you are, once a relationship is established with an informant, does the FBI allow an informant to engage in criminal behavior that is not related to the case, in this case, the anti-terrorism cases or investigations that they are informing on? Yes or no?
There are very specific and somewhat detailed and lengthy policies and guidelines that govern how we use our
correct, the confidential
sources.
informant unit?
Yes, so I think the answer to that question basically requires going into some depth about those policies and guidelines. And in addition, over the last couple of years, we've made very significant changes, separate and apart from anything to do with this matter, involving our confidential human source program, and we'd be happy to have somebody brief you on some of those changes because they're quite significant. As to the particular matter, as I said, I'm generally aware of it, but I'm quite confident I don't know all the details, and anytime we start getting into questions of who is or isn't a source and what they were or were not doing, I have to really tread carefully. So I think what I would suggest is let me have my staff follow up with you and see if there's more.
I would expect you to follow up with me directly. We're talking about 20 innocent lives. And to give you a sense of the impact this has had on the families, one father who lost his 2 sons was so destroyed by the crash that he suffered a series of strokes and now can no longer remember having children. One mother lost her son and her daughter-in-law and is now, as a grandmother, the guardian of kids age 4 and 5, who when they pass their parents' house and they see a car there, they think their parents miraculously are at home. The first responders stated the carnage was so extreme that veteran paramedics attending the crash site, who I've met with, developed disabling mental health issues. So I expect a response from you directly. But just to follow up some of the questions that are important for the people of this community to learn, in this case of Shahed Hussein, this is the informant, was the FBI aware that his company, Prestige Limo, repeatedly violated New York State transportation laws while he was an informant? Because I know that you're required to do that as part of the confidential informant unit.
So what I would say is my heart aches for those families, and I feel horrible about what's happened to them. I would say as to the specifics of this particular individual, partly because I don't know all the details, and partly because I have to tread very carefully whenever we start talking about somebody as a source or not a source, and when they were a source, and what they were doing as a source, and that kind of thing. I really need to make sure that any information we provide with you is consistent with policy, but also is accurate.
Great. I have a litany of questions. I am requesting your commitment today to turn over all the FBI's documents, including the source file related to Mr. Hussein, his family, his companies, and any involvement in the investigation. And as Congress, while I am requesting you to work with us, I will not hesitate to compel this, particularly next year, to issue a congressional subpoena with support from my colleagues, because these families deserve answers. And they've been yearning for answers, and it's been brushed under the rug. Yield back.
Mr. Castro.
Thank you, Chairman. Director Wray, I wanted to follow up on a question that Representative Stewart asked about Pegasus. You said that the FBI has tested the Pegasus software from the NSO group for counterintelligence purposes. Are you aware of any incidents of the Pegasus software being used by a foreign power against the United States? And if anybody else on the panel has anything to supplement on your answer, that would be very much appreciated.
I'd have to think about whether there's anything I could share here. If I could suggest, let me give a little thought to that, and maybe there's more I can provide on that in closed session this afternoon. I mean, certainly, I think there has been open source reporting about different governments using the technology, but whether it's been used against us, I'd have to think a little bit about that. And I also need to kind of keep straight in my head what I know about NSO from classified sources versus what I've heard in open sources.
No, I would appreciate that. And just as a reminder, this software has been used to target human rights activists, journalists, ordinary citizens by governments around the world. And NSO is a company that was developed in Israel by Israelis. And so Israel has been a strong friend of the United States. And I want to ask y'all whether you have pressured the Israeli government to crack down on Pegasus and a cottage industry of similar groups in Israel, whether y'all have taken that up with the Israeli government.
Thank you, Representative Castro. I'm not aware of any of us taking it up specifically with the Israeli government, but we can provide to you, I think, an answer after this hearing. Does that sound good?
Are you aware whether the White House has, or I know you're not the State Department, but the State Department has? I'm surprised that we haven't, especially because we have a very open line of communication with Israel, that we would not have spoken up about this.
We very well may have, and I just don't have information.
I also have a question on, we value, of course, here classified intelligence that your agencies gather and analyze to inform policy, but I want to ask a question about open source unclassified intelligence, which is also important. Open source intelligence is critically important to helping U.S. policymakers and the national security community navigate our country's role in the world. And it helps us engage with the American public. It informs media that can promote awareness of issues and promotes communication between different policymakers. And today, the reality of what's happening in Xinjiang by China and Ukraine by Russia is laid bare through open source information, often through translated documents. And so my question, Director Burns, is why did the open source enterprise stop publishing translated documents publicly? And will you push the OSCE to put out more of their translations publicly?
Thanks, Congressman. And I know Director Haynes may want to add to this because we've been working quite intensively with her and the rest of the intelligence community on open source issues, in part to address the question that you raised. I mean, I agree with you. I think open source information is going to only become more and more important in the years ahead. And then what use we make of that, including making public some translations, I think is only going to grow in importance.
Yeah, just to add to what Director Burns has indicated, this is an area where we absolutely agree with the fact that it's critical to our work, frankly, and across the enterprise, and DIA has also taken a big lead in this area. And essentially, we need to, we're going through a process where we're trying to make sure that we're organized effectively so that we can leverage our resources across the community, and also that we actually have devoted enough resources to open source. You'll see it, I think, in our budget submissions.
Sure, and I've got one last question, and we only have less than a minute, so you won't be able to answer all of it. But as you all know, the cyber threat from Russia and other nations is very real, including to our critical infrastructure and our defense systems. Simply put, even our most sophisticated weapons with strong, effective cyber attacks can be neutralized and made ineffective. And so my question is about the status of our cyber alliances around the world. How strongly have we developed our cyber alliances, both for defense purposes and, if necessary, for offensive purposes in cyberspace?
So, Congressman, I think that what you've hit on is really the key for the future, these series of partnerships that we have. And we've seen the partnerships. I sit next to Director Wray, who has been a tremendous partner in our ability to get after some of the cybersecurity threats here in our nation. But it's broader than that, as you had indicated. So we have rich partnerships with, obviously, our Five Eyes partners, a series of other partners within both Europe and the Pacific. And as far as the work that we do full spectrum, I'd like to take that on this afternoon because I think that would be appropriate given the discussions we've had this morning on Russia and the Ukraine.
Sure.
I would just add, completely agree with General Nakasone, but I would add that just about every significant major takedown that we've engineered together against foreign adversaries, cyber adversaries, whether they be criminal or nation state, almost invariably involve a whole slew of foreign partners all acting in concert. And one of the clear lessons from the last few years is that that is the most effective weapon against cyber adversaries, is joint sequenced operations. I like to say cyber is sort of the ultimate team sport, and we do that with our foreign partners.
Thank you.